Hi everyone, it's Rax. Now that patch 1.1.3 is finally going to nerf crowd control, which made a video I think in the first week of Diablo 4 called The Biggest Problem with Diablo 4, where I talked about the crowd control and it just being ridiculous in the game. Now that they're going to address it, we'll see how well that turns out, if that actually fixes the problem. I want to turn my attention to what I think is the new lowest hanging fruit in the game, the easiest way that Blizzard can make the game way better with the least amount of development time, and that's by making a loot filter. I think the loot filter is more important than just about anything else you could come up with in Diablo 3, or Diablo 4, I mean. The reason why is a loot filter impacts every endgame activity that you do forever. No matter what they come up with, this loot filter will always play a role and will always help you. Class balancing comes here and there, bug fixes, they're going to get to those eventually. But the thing about the loot filter that they could design for Diablo 4 is the initial implementation of it could be so simple, and it could still have such a great impact that I don't know why they don't put a lot of their resources into building this right now. It doesn't need to be this crazy, super robust, customizable, greatest loot filter we've ever seen, because Diablo 4 itemization currently is already very simple. So I want to go through, I have a little sheet over here with how I wrote some things down on how we could build it in a very simple way. And if we could implement this quickly, I think it would make a huge difference for a lot of people. All right, so let's look at an item in Diablo 4, which once again is not very complicated. For an item, you have its item power level. It's mostly just ancestral at the end of the game. That's all that you really care about. Loot filters really don't help you until you get to the end game. Usually you just pick everything up along the way as you're going up. But in the end game, when you get to the ancestrals or the sacreds that are 700 plus, you upgrade them 5 times and the rolls turn to ancestral. It's pretty much all that you're looking for. Then you have the stats on an item, the intelligence, the damage to frozen, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, you have the power at the bottom. Okay, so let's take these one at a time. And let's start with the item power level, at least with the current iteration of the game. Well, the magic number we're looking for is 700, because whenever you get a sacred item that's at least 700, for like a helmet, for example, if you upgrade it 5 times for the plus 25 item power, once an item crosses the 725 item power threshold, the rolls, the range of the rolls, become ancestral. So you could just put in like a basic filter for like armors and jewelry and just saying, if it's a sacred item, don't show it to me unless it's 700 or higher. You could even get more picky if you want, and you could just say, don't show it to me unless it's ancestral. Then for weapons and offhands, it's different because the value of the item power actually increases your damage. The item power level here increases your armor, and here it increases your resistances, which are okay, but these are the ones that really matter. So maybe you would set the threshold for every item up here at 700 or higher, and everything right here, you'd set it 790 or higher, and that's it. And it's a very simple filter that can't be too hard to make, right? Then for the stats, let us go into the filter and manually pick 1 or 2 stats per item slot that we're looking for. Maybe on the dagger, I'm looking for critical strike damage and vulnerable damage. If it doesn't have those 2 things on it, and it's not 790 or plus or higher, don't show it to me. Another thing here is for like an amulet, for example. I'm looking for Devouring Blaze, and I'm looking for cooldown reduction. If it doesn't have those 2 things on it, then don't show it to me. Something even as simple as that would go a huge, huge way. That's all that we would need to do. And then finally, for the legendary powers, maybe we could have a table of them, kind of like the Codex of Power. Maybe we could select certain ones that we don't want to see, filter them out. Maybe there's also an option to say, filter out any power that is minimum rolled. If it's a minimum value, don't even show it to me. I don't even want to see it. Maybe you could get really greedy and say, only show it to me if it's a max roll power. And I know what you guys are thinking. You guys are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, Rax, if we set up all these filters, then literally like hardly any items are going to drop. How are we going to compensate for all the gold that we're going to lose and all the mats that we're going to lose for salvaging? This is something that needs to be decided either by Blizzard whether they want to do an estimate of how many fewer items are going to be dropped via the loot filter and maybe adjust the vendor prices and the re-rolling prices accordingly. Or maybe it's just up to you some days to say, I'm getting low on mats. You want to know what? I'm going to uncheck this and show me whatever drops because I need to salvage and vendor for a while. Maybe that's a thing. There's different ways you could approach that topic. I already thought about that, but that's a couple of ideas on how they could mess with it. Here's some things that you don't need. You don't need to filter by sockets because it doesn't matter if an item comes with sockets or not. You just walk over to the vendor and add your sockets. So that's not a big deal at all. Another thing is you don't need a filtration system for uniques whatsoever. Because when a unique drops, you want to pick it up because it vendors for a lot of gold. So you don't even need to be able to filter by the uniques that drop. It just doesn't have to be that complicated. So the purpose of this video is, I think this is a low-hanging fruit that impacts every endgame activity forever. And with how simple Diablo 4 itemization is, it doesn't have to be that complicated to make a huge impact. Now, maybe some people in chat, if you have a great idea for a loot filter that I haven't thought of, please post it. Or if there's some other huge problem that I didn't think of, post it. If there's a really good one, I'll pin it to the top. But in general, this can't be that hard to make. And the sooner that Blizzard gets this into their game, all of a sudden, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, the end game is going to be way more fun. It's going to be way more playable. It's going to be way more enjoyable when we're only seeing the loot that drops that's really good and we can look through it. I do think they should consider the salvaging cost, the material cost, the gold cost, maybe to compensate for it. That would be a nice change to pair with the loot filter coming in, because we're certainly going to filter some stuff out. But I think this would be a huge, gigantic improvement for the game. And I hope Blizzard is already actively working on this and will implement it into the game very soon. Thank you.